Hey, what's going on, AP Government people? We have Chapter 9 of Government in America for you today. This one is on nominations and campaigns. It's a good one. Lots of interesting stuff in this chapter. So let's get started talking about the nomination game. Now, when we're talking about nomination, that means if a candidate receives a nomination, they receive the party endorsement for that specific office, whether it is for the presidency or a congressional office or anything in between. The campaign strategy is the ways in which a candidate tries to win nomination for said office. Now, when a candidate decides to run, there are a lot of factors that go into it. And campaigns in other countries last about 2 months. And in the United States, it is much longer. Presidential candidates in the US, they campaign for at least a year in advance, if not even longer. Presidential candidates compete for delegates in order to win their party's nomination. At the National Party Convention, which meets every 4 years, this convention nominates the president and the vice president, and it creates the party's platform. Delegates to the convention used to be chosen by political leaders, and they would wield a lot of power, but today it is much different. As a result of the McGovern-Fraser Commission, which was a result of the 1968 Democratic Convention, this helped allow for more input from the public for Democratic conventions. And basically, this allowed the public to pick delegates to represent them at the National Convention. Now, the delegate selection must not be done in secret like it used to be. They are done so by primary elections or open meetings. There is a group of superdelegates, and these are guaranteed to be delegates to the convention based on their position, and this includes members of Congress who are automatically given a superdelegate status or members of the National Committee for their party. 19% of delegates at the 2008 Democratic Convention were superdelegates, and 6% of Republicans were superdelegates. And superdelegates, unlike delegates, can support any candidate that they choose, so they can, in theory, change the outcome of the convention. Okay, let's talk about caucuses and primaries, two terms that are thrown around quite often. And whether your state has a caucus or a primary is up to that state. Now, a caucus is when voters attend an open meeting and they choose their candidate for president. Here is a picture of a caucus. You notice that many people are showing up for a meeting and there will be a discussion. It is much more time consuming than primaries, and as a result, the voter turnout for caucuses tends to be much lower. The Iowa caucus is the first step in the nomination process for candidates every 4 years. So in January, you'll see lots of attention is paid to Iowa for their caucus for the presidential nomination. So in January 2016, Iowa will have a lot of focus on it. And campaigns could be made or broken here. And Jimmy Carter in 1976 really came out of nowhere and won the Iowa caucus, and that helped catapult him to the presidency. And as a result of this, Iowa receives a lot of money and attention during primary season, more so than many other states. Now, presidential primaries, the term primary means that voters go to polls to vote for candidates. And New Hampshire is traditionally the first primary, so like Iowa, they receive a lot of money and attention for candidates. In this picture here that we're looking at, that white building is called the FoxBox because Fox News was set up there every 4 years to cover the New Hampshire primary. Now, winning Iowa and or New Hampshire helps build a candidate's image, and the number one thing a candidate is concerned with is their image. Front-loading has happened as a result of Iowa and New Hampshire, and states begin to move their primaries earlier to gain more media attention. And a majority of delegates are chosen in the first 6 weeks of the season. So even though the primary and caucus season lasts a very long time, within the first 6 weeks, a candidate, in theory, could have the nomination wrapped up. As the primary season goes on, more and more candidates drop out, and that's due to a lack of money. Candidacies are very expensive, as we'll see in a few moments. Now, when we're talking about evaluating the primary and caucus system, there are many criticisms, including too much attention is spent on early contests. Again, Iowa and New Hampshire. Small populations help dictate the nomination race. It is difficult for politicians to run and compete their duties. So if you are a member of Congress and running for president, it's difficult to still vote on all these issues that are required of you and yet be everywhere to run for the presidency. And voter participation is low. It's lower than what it is for the presidential election. And the media is very, very powerful. Some would argue too powerful. Let's talk about the convention now. Again, happens every 4 years. Prior to the convention, there's virtually no doubt who will win the nomination. It didn't used to be that way. It used to be at conventions, you could go into the convention not knowing who that party would nominate for the presidency. 38 million people watched Obama receive the nomination in 2008. So just over 10% of the population watched this. So it's not really a big thing to watch on TV. In years past, virtually all delegates were white males over 40. Today, it is much different. It is much more representative of American society. Now let's take a look at the week-long convention, which has been dubbed an infomercial for the party. Day one, there was a keynote speaker, and in 2004, there was a young senator from Illinois by the name of Barack Obama, who was the keynote speaker, really came out of nowhere and surprised many people with his address, and this really helped catapult him on the national scene. Day two is when the party will issue its party platform, and it will outline the goals and policies of the next 4 years. And day three is the formal nomination of the candidate, and this is where the candidate will give his or her acceptance speech. And that is the final step in the week-long convention. Okay, let's talk about the media campaign. Let's talk about media in campaigns. TV is the most common way to reach voters, and the internet is incredibly important and becoming more and more important as time goes on. This is a way to spread news and raise money as well. Although the internet raises smaller donations than other avenues, many more people can be reached through the internet. Now, direct mail is a way to reach potential supporters and ask for donations, but that can be very costly for campaigns. The importance of media cannot be overstated. They provide a source of advertisement and free advertising via news. So not only do candidates advertise on TV and in the media can also cover stories for them and provide free advertising for their issues. Half of all presidential campaign money is spent on TV ads, and news coverage does not always focus on issues, but rather campaign details. So if you were to watch the news in, say, October of 2016, you will notice that they probably will talk about what the candidates were doing on that specific day rather than what the issues were that they are concerned with. So there are several requirements to run an effective campaign, and they include hiring a campaign manager, a fundraiser, a campaign lawyer, a media expert, a campaign staff, which will include many young volunteers, a research staff and advisors, a pollster to help determine where you stand, a press secretary to interact with the media, a website, and so much more. And all of that, ladies and gentlemen, costs money. Lots and lots of money. This is why it's hard for many people to stay in campaigns very long, and why you see so many people drop out, especially after Iowa and New Hampshire, if their campaigns do not do well. If you were looking for a great movie that shows the inner workings of a campaign, it's a fiction movie, but it's absolutely great. It's called The Ides of March. It stars George Clooney and Ryan Gosling, and of course, it is from my favorite city. It's based in my favorite city, Cincinnati. It's a really great movie that shows the inner workings of a campaign. Very, very good. So let's talk about the maze of campaign finance reform. And this all goes back to the Federal Election Campaign Act of 1974. Definitely, absolutely be familiar with this. I'm sure it will be on your test in some way, shape, or form. This created the Federal Election Commission, or the FEC, which administers and enforces campaign laws. And there's the logo for the FEC. This also created the Presidential Election Campaign Fund, and this allows the FEC to give money to candidates. Now, if you do your taxes on your own, I usually do taxes on TurboTax. It'll ask me at the end, do you wish to donate $3 from your tax returns to the Federal Campaign Fund for the presidential election? And you can click check yes or no. That's where this money comes from. They also provide partial public funding for presidential primaries. They give matching funds. So $250 for every 4 candidates that raise $5,000 in at least 20 states. Now, candidates must limit spending to receive matching funds. So if a candidate wants funds, there's limits to how much they can spend. In 2000, Bush refused matching funds, which allowed him more opportunities to raise money, and other candidates have since followed. This act also provides full public financing for major party candidates in election, and this is in the form of a grant to candidates. In 2008, it was $85 million, which John McCain took, but Obama in 2008 refused the $85 million. This also requires full disclosure of who contributes and how much money they contribute, and it would limit contributions. And this limits individual contributions to campaigns, and as of 2008, it was $2,300. Now, in the Supreme Court case Buckley v. Vallejo, the Supreme Court ruled that individuals could contribute as much to their own campaign as they wish. They used the First Amendment and stated that individuals can contribute as much as they want to their own campaign. And Ross Perot, who ran for president in 1992, spent $60 million of his own money to finance his campaign. All right, soft money is a term you should be familiar with. This is money not given to a specific candidate, but party expenses, and there are no limits on contributions. At least there weren't until the McCain-Feingold Act came along, which banned soft money contributions and limited corporations and unions. It limited their ability to pay for ads 60 days prior to an election, so it tried to limit the impact of corporations and unions. The second part, that part on corporations and unions, was overturned in the court case Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission from 2010. Let's talk about 527 groups. These are independent groups that have no restriction on funding, provided they do not explicitly endorse a candidate. So these organizations can raise as much money as they want as long as they do not endorse a candidate. And in 2004, there was a group called the Swift Boat Veterans for Truth, which questioned and called into account John Kerry's military service. That group could receive unlimited money because they did not explicitly endorse a candidate, in this case, George Bush. MoveOn.org in 2004 did the exact same thing with Bush. They did not specifically endorse John Kerry, so there was no limits to funding. 501c groups are similar, and these are groups that can receive unlimited contributions and do not have to report them. However, no more than half of the money that they spend can be on political activities. So there are limits on the amount of money they can spend on political activities, but there's no limits on the amount of contributions they can get. So let's talk about PACs. PACs is something you absolutely positively have to know. It's been on many AP exams in the form of multiple choice questions. PACs stand for Political Action Committees, and they can donate up to $5,000 per candidate in both primary and general elections. Interest groups can form PACs to support favorable candidates, and there are literally thousands of different PACs that support hundreds of different candidates, if not thousands. They are especially influential in congressional elections, where that $5,000 goes a lot further than it would in a presidential election. The FEC is required to receive reports of all PAC spending. So the FEC does keep an eye on PACs. So the question is, are campaigns too expensive? Well, the 2008 cost for Congress and presidential campaigns was $5 billion, or 0.05% of the GDP. So when you compare it to the GDP, it's really not too outrageous. But if you look at these two maps here, every dollar sign you see represents $1 million, and every wave that you see represents either the presidential candidate or the vice presidential candidate going to that state. What you'll notice is there are certain states that receive a lot of money and a lot of visits, and most notably Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida. These are called swing states because they tend to not vote for one political party every single presidential election. I was in Ohio in October of 2012, and I could not go 30 seconds on the radio without hearing a commercial for either Obama or Romney. That Ohio is such a powerful swing state that many candidates spend lots of money there and lots of time. So why is campaign finance reform difficult to achieve if many people think it would be good? Well, Congress is hesitant to tie their own hands. If Congress institutes campaign finance reform, they would have to follow those rules. So let's talk about the impact of campaigns. There are three effects of campaigns on voters. One is reinforcement. The campaign can reinforce a person's preference for a candidate. The second one, it can activate voters to get involved by spending money or volunteering, not just voting. And third, it can convert voters to a new perspective. Now, out of the three, campaigns most often do not convert voters. They most often activate and reinforce voters. There's this idea of selective perception, which means that individuals pay attention to issues that people agree with or are interested in. And I always think about this. I got a 2011 Hyundai Sonata years ago. I leased it. And the day I leased it, I was driving home, and I could not believe how many Hyundai Sonatas were on the road. It seemed like everybody had a Hyundai Sonata. I was seeing this car everywhere. Is that true? No. But rather, because I was aware of this new car that I just got, I began to perceive it and see it everywhere I was going. So that's the idea of selective perception. People tend to pay attention to issues that they agree with or are interested in. Are nominations and campaigns too democratic? Well, in most countries, the nomination is still controlled by a select few. Again, not the way it is in the United States. Many unknowns can and do become president, whether it's Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, or even Barack Obama. So this is possible for unknown people to come out of nowhere and become president. Some people believe that America is in a permanent campaign, that you are constantly in re-election mode, and some Americans suffer paralysis by analysis and do nothing. There's so much information out there that many people just do nothing and do not vote and do not get involved in the process. Do big campaigns lead to an increased scope of government is another question. Campaigning can lead to many more promises. So for example, in Iowa, the Iowa caucuses, you'll see many candidates say that they are in favor of farm subsidies to farmers in Iowa. Well, if the government is giving farm subsidies, that will increase the size and scope of the government. And it's not just in Iowa that these promises are made. They're in many other states as well. And these promises can increase the involvement of the federal government in local affairs. All right, let's wrap up with a quick recap. We have primary versus caucus. Know the difference. Delegate versus superdelegate. Again, know the difference there as well. The importance of image during primaries is oh so important. The role of the media in campaigns that can help make or break an individual. The Federal Election Commission, know what they can do. Very, very important. You will see that on tests. 527 groups and 501c groups, know the difference between the two, and absolutely positively no PACs. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I can almost guarantee you'll see that in May on your AP exam. And finally, know the benefits and weaknesses of American campaigns versus other countries. All right, thank you very much for watching. If you have not already, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel. Help me spread the word. If you found this video helpful, please share it with somebody. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. And make sure you check out George Clooney's movie, The Ides of March. Even if you don't like George Clooney or Ryan Gosling, it's all about Cincinnati in there. You get to see the beautiful city, the amazing skyline, and just really everything good about the city. So check it out, and you'll get to see whether or not George Clooney becomes president. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. I'll see you right back here for Chapter 10. Have a good day.